Nathan, thanks for joining us.
How you doing? It has been a while.
Last time we caught up was at the start of the first lockdown, and you allowed me to grace you with my presence on your podcast.
And I've been ever grateful ever since.
Oh, it was good fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that was a really good interview.
Well, yeah, obviously, of course. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 6th episode of the 6 Sessions, and first of the brand new hassle-free year. I'm still hanging on to that. I'm sure things will level out at some point. Each week, I've been lucky enough to chat to somebody in the growth space across marketing, sales, and customer experience. I'm kind of hoping that hanging out with interesting people will rub off on me, making me smarter by default. These are designed to be short and sweet, but hopefully full of insight. So hopefully you will learn something out of this. Nathan's a great guy. You will learn something from him. And they're definitely unfiltered. So it'll make it fun, but you may hear a few shits and fox. My guest today is focused on helping businesses launch and run successful podcasts as part of their new business strategy. His niche is owner-managed agencies. He's been in sales and new business for agencies for over 10 years and has helped agencies generate several £1 million of new business revenue. Nathan runs a successful podcast called Agency Dealmasters. Definitely check it out if you've not seen it, where he interviews world-class agency owners. I'm not quite sure how I made the cut on that, but thanks anyway. Authors and marketers to find out how they grow and deliver exceptional results for their clients. Whether you run an agency or not, if you're looking at ways to ramp up new business in 2021, you can learn a lot from Nathan. So check out his stuff, check out the podcast, and definitely follow him on social. So with all that in mind, I'm excited to welcome Nathan on. Nathan, welcome.
Thank you very much.
How's that for an intro? Every week I'm trying to make the intros more and more gushing because at some point I'm hoping somebody's going to either blush or cry.
Well, the blushing won't really work for me with my dark complexion, but the crying, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a great intro. I hope I can live up to the billing.
Yeah, me too. Otherwise, it's gonna be egg on my face. So, first up, how was 2020 for you?
Are you allowed to swear on your show? I think you did.
Fucking yeah.
So
Friday afternoon.
Yeah. Look, I'm not talking about 2020. 2020 didn't really happen for me. It was 2019 and then 2021, which is where we are now. No, look, it's been challenging for all of us, but like weirdly enough, we've actually grown a lot over the last 6 months specifically. We're focused on a niche, which is helping agencies produce these amazing shows and podcasts, because we're all in a lockdown now. So we're consuming a lot more content online and through digital means. So yeah, that's really been great for us. And I've just learned a lot and grown a lot and met a lot of amazing, interesting people, getting Zoom fatigue and Teams fatigue, but we're still here.
How so like that growth, did you find, and I'm totally going off script from the questions I promised you I was going to ask, but we'll get back to those. Did that growth, do you reckon that's come from like a quasi pivot? Because you didn't start out doing podcasts. Like when you and I first spoke like years back now, that wasn't your main gig. It was kind of like part of the mix. So have you found like the 2020 growth has come from like a reshaping or a shift, or is it just kind of happen?
Yeah, that's right. So in the beginning of 2020, we were planning a really big agency event, actually the biggest agency event that's ever been run in the UK. It was going to be 500 people in the middle of Birmingham. We're going to have all these amazing speakers right in the center of town, basically this huge earth-shattering physical event. And then we figured out in February that wasn't going to happen. So we had to change all of our plans, because a lot of what we did was sort of physical in-person events and creating content in person. So we changed that to focusing down on audio content and visual content. And I'm glad that we did, because, that's put us in a really good position where we are right now. And at the same time, we kind of just, because we had a lot more time on our hands, we were able to just produce a ton of content. And I think it's that content and those relationships that we've built through the content and speaking to amazing people that's now starting to pay off, and it's starting to come back to us. So yeah, content marketing works, guys. It's a thing.
So like top level bullet points, what does your business do?
We help marketing agencies produce and run their own shows, their own podcast shows.
Why agencies? Because I mean, agencies are like hit and miss, and we can be a pain in the ass to work with.
You can be a pain in the ass, right? I'm glad that you said it. Why agencies? Because I guess that's my space. That's the world that I know. I know the challenges of running an agency because I started an unsuccessful agency myself, which we'll maybe get into a little bit later. And I know the pain of the failure of that. But I've also worked in agencies in new business roles for many, many years. I've got a large network, and I know a lot of agency owners, and I know the challenges that they have growing successful agency businesses. And it kind of just made sense to kind of start there. God knows where we'll end, but that's a really good jumping off point. What's
your role? Like, what does your day-to-day look like?
What does my day-to-day look like? Doing a lot of this stuff. I produce a lot of content, both for agency Dealmasters and for our clients. So I'm interviewing a lot. I'm writing questions. I am finding amazing guests. I'm hiring people. We're going on we've gone on a growth spurt ourselves. So audio engineers and designers and writers and all those amazing people that kind of make the engine work. I've got very little time for myself right now. Reading a lot as well. Just a whole lot of growth.
So I get this right. You actually will almost like podcast in a box for an agency. So you will help them define what their podcast should look like, and then you will help them run that podcast.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So come up with the visual identity, come up with the theme of the show, come up with, who are the people that they really want to be speaking to, both to develop relationships with existing clients and develop relationships with new prospects as well. It's a great way of just getting in front of people in a very untraditional way. Not many people do it, but it's a great way of building relationships. So you come up with the style and the theme of the show, and you come up with the regularity and sort of, what it looks and sounds like. And then, we have a whole team of people who are excellent hosts of show. I can't be on everyone's show, but there are a lot of journalists that we have that, again, are looking for kind of career pivots at the moment. Who are excellent hosts. They're really good at researching people. They're really good at, finding nuggets of information. They're really good at articulating themselves and asking questions. So we have hosts who are able to kind of pull together and run a show, which enables the agency to kind of become famous in our vernacular, right? Agencies need to become famous, and when you're famous, you're more likely to be invited to pitches, and clients respond to your content, and they're more likely to pick up your phone call. But it comes from creating really high quality, consistent content and thought leadership that is relevant and fun.
That's quite unique because there's other businesses out there who will like help with podcasts, but it's normally like editing and maybe some research and scripting. There's very rare that they will help with like the hosting and kind of that side of things. So agencies, like typically speaking, agencies will have roughly speaking, a niche, right? So I focus in B2B tech and SaaS primarily. Like we have some outliers. There's other people who focus like just straight out manufacturing, et cetera, et cetera. But we typically pitch in a very similar way, and we kind of change things around in our experiences differently. How do you work with different agencies and then define their distinct, like the style and kind of build that out within the agency? Is it based on their clients, or do you base it on internally focusing? So like, do you base it on like the personalities of the people in the business, or like the persona of the business, or do you go, actually, here is your target market, so we're going to build this around them? Like, how do you approach that with so many agencies?
Well, that's it. I mean, generally agencies, the good agencies anyway, like yourselves, have a really quite defined niche and audience that they want to go after anyway. So whether that is manufacturing or B2B SaaS or financial services, that they sort of naturally sort of move towards a niche anyway. And then even within that niche, there are so many podcasts out there, right? There are millions, tens of thousands. So then how do you create that kind of greenfield site? How do you create a show that really stands on its own 2 feet and that is different to the other tens of thousands of podcasts out there? And that really comes out of, as you said before, like who are the people behind the agency? What are they about? What's their background and their history? What's the personality of the agency? And how do how do we stand on a niche, whether that is financial services or a particular angle in financial services. Maybe it might be insurance or insurtech or high or sort of high production value manufacturing. There are so many niches within niches. All the major kind of functions have been taken within podcasting, marketing, business, finance. But then within those niches, within those segments, there are so many micro niches that are yet to be owned. And that's the opportunity for not only agencies, but for any business that wants to kind of get into podcasting.
So why, like, the overarching question I'm going to ask is, like, why would an agency do a podcast? Like, what's the point? But like, digging into that, how does an agency turn chatting, like an interview podcast series, how do they turn that into new business? Like, what is the mechanism from going from broadcasting what is effectively a digital radio show into bringing pounds back into the agency?
Well, in a couple of ways, actually. So the first one is that you're building. If you do it well, you build relationships with existing clients. It's so hard. I'll give you an example of a client that we're working with at the moment. They're a large B2B tech agency in Leeds, and they work with clients, multi-billion-pound organizations, but they tend to only work with a particular department or function within this organization. The organization is huge, right? So how do you go from a specific department within a specific function of a multi-billion-pound organization to working with the rest of the organization? And that comes from developing relationships with your existing clients and then getting them to refer you to other people within the business who could be on the show, who could kind of be guests on other shows that are part of the podcast. So the first part is really looking at who are your existing customers. That's your lower hanging fruit. How do you invite them on the show, build a relationship with them, and then get them to refer you to other people within their business? But also then, if you're looking at new business, are there, who would you ideally love to have as a guest on the show, or who would you ideally love to have as a client? And one of the best ways, it's a huge differentiator, rather than emailing someone or calling them or cold calling them, ask them to be on your show. It's a very different sort of approach. Most people don't do it, and people love to be asked about their expertise and their history and what they've done. So it's a really different way to kind of approach people that you really love to work with in a way that is non-salesy, non-confrontational, but that adds a lot of value to them because it builds their own personal brand and their own personal profile. And a lot of these people, they've had successful careers. They want to talk about it. So give them the platform to do that. But in addition to that as well, it's not just about having the podcast. It's like, what can you do with that content once you have it? How do you then repurpose that into webinars? We ran one recently where, we've done 20 or so episodes now, but we've got three of those, three of the people that we had really good interviews with, and we got them on a webinar to talk about the future of B2B sales, right? So again, you're kind of repurposing the relationship and you're repurposing the content in different ways. So we turn that into a webinar, and then we turn that into a quarterly report, and that quarterly report can then be a biannual report or an annual report. So you need to think about using the content that you produce on the podcast in many different useful ways to generate leads and create that fame that we talk about.
So like one of my favorite plays from an ABM perspective is, if you've got an ABM target, is inviting them onto a podcast. People love talking about what they do and how they do it. And it's a great way, like you're talking about, to build a relationship. But what about when that target is an absolutely shit interviewee? But you don't necessarily know that until, so you risk damaging the podcast. Like, how do you circumvent that?
That's a good question. Well, number one is that you need to have really good questions. I think the preparation, there are so many podcasts that I listen to where I can just tell there's no preparation involved in this at all. They've just turned up, hit record and,
that better not be a dig at me.
This is very well prepared. You know who I am. You know my name. You had a whole intro, prepared. So, but you know what I'm talking about. There are so many podcasts where you can tell that there's been no prep. And I think, you need to, so we have a process where, we do a pre-interview, and through that process, we get to know them a little bit more, and they get to know us and the sort of questions that we got. And then we research them, we read their book if they have a book, or, dig into what they've done in their history and background. You'd be surprised how few people do that. And then we write specific questions, and we make sure that those questions are tailored to the things that they know most about themselves and their career. We also start the interview in a very, traditional way by talking about them and their history and background to kind of get them warmed up. And that's what allows you to then kind of start to have, a better sort of conversation. It doesn't work in every instance. I mean, there are some people who, for whatever reason, as soon as the lights turn on, they clam up. But I guess that comes back to the skill of the host to be able to kind of settle them down, make sure that they're not nervous, and kind of get out the bits of information that turns the show into a pretty good piece of content.
So my plan is, I was just saying to you before we started, so we're about to launch our third podcast, because I believe in them and I love the content, and I love the different angles, and it's different people doing them, and it's a lot of fun. And that's, for me, a big driver and a lot of fun. But the fourth one I want to launch is, but I can't do it until after the lockdowns have finally finished, is I want to call it Agency Owner Beers. So I'm going to get other agency owners. We're going to have a few drinks, and then I'm going to ask them questions that they probably wouldn't answer when they have a few drinks, just to loosen up a little bit, because agency owners are very good at rosy lighting everything. So
great idea. Send guests champagne, alcohol.
Okay, so where you sit within who you sell to and your agency experience, you've got a lot of insight into what's happening in the agency landscape. What have you seen happening over the agency landscape over the last 12 months?
Oh God. A lot. I mean, there are a lot of agencies that I've spoken to have actually done really well last year. It started off like a shit show, oh my God, really? What?
The house is burning.
And the house is on fire. Someone get a water hose. But then towards the back end of last year, there are so many agency owners that I know that have just have had their best years ever. And I'm like, well, so how have you done that in the worst kind of downturn and recession? And I think it's kind of testament to all of the work that they've done building their agencies for the many years before that, right? The agents, the client relationships that they've had, etc. But I think it's forced a lot of people to innovate and really focus on the most important things and streamline their businesses. And it's really forced them to really focus. I think that's really helped. Also, I think clients there's this camaraderie that's kind of brought clients and agencies together. I think clients are more in the mood to help a lot more. I've seen that a lot more. Although, we are seeing clients that are sort of holding back on spending as well. So it has been a mixed bag. I guess we haven't heard so much from those agencies that have been struggling as much, because those stories aren't as readily available. And I'm sure that, there are many agencies like that too. But I think it's just, when your back's against the wall, you figure out a way. You become really creative and innovative, and you create new products and new solutions, and you speak to your customers more, and you're closer to them, and you pick up the phone and have conversations, which is one of the things that many agency owners just didn't really do very much before. So I think that's something that I've seen a lot. I've also seen as well, I mean, from my own point of view, the things that I'm really excited about right now in marketing are things like behavioral science, like the introduction of behavioral science into marketing disciplines a lot more, like all the stuff that Rory Sutherland talks about in terms of, the stuff that doesn't really change with human beings, like the reason we are the way we are, like deep, fundamental, psychological things that are inbuilt within human beings. And those are the things that don't really change. Channels change, messaging changes, etc. But who we are and our deep-seated motivations, those things haven't changed. And if you read, Greek mythology, you'll see that it's the same stuff that has motivated us for thousands of years, right? Things don't change that much.
So I think my view on it is, I think win or lose, the common, like whether or not an agency has been flying or struggling over the last 12 months, the common denominator is like there is a lot of burnout, particularly at like that owner managed level, like the leadership levels, because whether you're winning or losing, I think everybody was moving at 100 mile an hour for a long period of time with no real respite. So I think that's my main takeaway from a lot of like the agency owners that I speak to, particularly like at the end of the last year, I was just like done. I was like, I'm out, I'm finished. I'm having Christmas and I'm not talking to anybody.
Yeah.
So coming back to you, what got you into like the whole growth and marketing and sales scene?
So it was 2010. I was young-ish then, and people sort of assumed that because I was young, I knew about social media. So there were a few like local coffee shops and hotels and restaurants that were like, "Oh, you're young, you know how to do this Facebook thing. Can you help me out with Facebook?" And I was like, "Really? People are willing to pay me to be on Facebook all day? Like, okay, sure." So that's how it all started. I had no idea what an agency was. I had no idea what I was doing at all, but we just started managing social media accounts for local businesses. And through that process, I didn't know what I should have been charging. I was overworking and not delivering very much, to be honest, and had running the business into the ground. Me and my co-founder, we had no idea what we were doing. And then some of the clients, after a while of paying invoices, were like, "Well, I see that a lot of conversations are happening here on our Facebook pages, but what is it actually generating in terms of revenue and new customers?" And we were like, "There are lots of likes."
Yeah.
But that's what then got me into HubSpot, because I was like, there must be a way of measuring the stuff that you're doing online. There must be a way of sort of equating that into some sort of ROI. By the way, this is very new terminology to me. At the time, I was just like, there must be a way of figuring out, right, what you're doing online. And it just so happens that there was this new company called HubSpot that just launched, that just come to the UK. And, they were like, well, this whole thing of traffic, leads and sales. And that got me fascinated into demand generation and content marketing and thought leadership, and joined another agency. And then, the rest is history.
Nice.
That startup failed, by the way, the first one.
Mate, we've all got
a
closet. I've had failed startups. I think that's where I've learned my best lessons. I think absolutely the battle scars help the wins later down the line.
That's
right. So what excites you most? What excites you most about marketing now?
I think the stuff I said about behavioral science, right? The stuff that doesn't change about human beings. Like, there are all these new tools and platforms and things that people are introducing. But I think, take it back to basics. Like, what do people want? Like, what are their motivations? Why do people do what they do? And those things haven't changed forever. There are a handful of motivations that human beings have. And I think if you build your messaging and your marketing and your go-to-market around those things, I don't think you'll go far wrong.
Okay. So how are you planning to grow in 2021? Assuming the world kind of chills out a little bit.
Just more great content. I think content is really the thing. This whole idea of kind of scaling yourself. What you're doing right now is you're scaling yourself. You're creating content and information that goes out thousands, hopefully millions of times around the world, right? You're creating many different avenues and ways for people to find you and discover you. And I think if you can do that in entertaining way, the trick is to do it in a way that is entertaining and educational and fun, and gets people wanting more, right? It's the age-old thing of attracting attention and keeping it. And that's what's hard. It's like when you're running your day job and doing client work, finding the time to create relevant, useful, thought-provoking, interesting content is a challenge, especially for agencies, because as soon as clients say, hey, we have a job, everything stops and you focus on that, which is what you should do. But then your own marketing kind of goes on, by the wayside. Hence the reason why we exist, right? Hence the reason why I have a job.
So that's the reason. So like we've now got like permanent internal resource. Like we have somebody who that is their job to market us, and obviously we have sales team and stuff like that. And I think that's when I look at like the step changes we had in our growth was bringing in somebody who was focused on sales. Then so like it became like it was part of my job, and then we had somebody focused on it. That was a step change in growth. And now we're at the point where we can justify having like a standalone marketer, and that we're starting to see the step change in that as well. And I think that's the biggest mistake that agencies often make, is that they forget about telling their story when they're going through that growth process. Absolutely, got to deliver the client work. That shit's got to come first. But you cannot let the other stuff fall away, because if that falls away, there's nothing to feed the sales team, and then there's no new client down the line.
That's it. It's a continual engine. It has to be on. You can't turn the engine off.
So that's why everybody should work with you, Nathan.
Great sales pitch. Thank you very much.
Welcome, you're welcome. You can have that. So, Nathan, thanks for being on our 6 sessions. First one of the year. Is there any parting wisdom you want to share on a Friday afternoon with everybody?
Wisdom, none for me. You'll be getting any wisdom from me, Richard, unfortunately. But no, thank you very much for inviting me on the show. It's an honor. It's a privilege. I don't get to do these things very often. People don't ask me questions. I'm the one asking the questions, which is like, oh, what am I even going to say? So yeah, really appreciate it. So listen, like, subscribe. Sorry?
If anyone wants to follow up with you, where should they reach out?
agencydealmasters.com. Please listen to the podcast, like and subscribe. I'm sure you'll find something. We've had over 108 episodes now, so I'm sure you'll find one that is half decent that you'll get some kind of value from. So let me know.
Perfect. Nathan, thanks for doing that. Always a pleasure. And
appreciate it.
We'll get to catch up in person soon.
Love it. Looking forward to it, Richard. Thank you.